Today I'm replacing the base of my wife's antique hope chest, because I broke the old one. Hey guys, how's it going? Before you yell at me in the comments, I didn't do it on purpose. I went to slide it across the floor and one of the legs had apparently sunken a little bit further into the carpet than I thought it did. I didn't think there was quite enough surface to glue the leg back on to properly reattach it, and the base had clearly been repaired once or twice before. From what I could tell, one of the main issues with this base was that it wasn't properly allowed to expand and contract, at least in my opinion, which led it to crack. So, since there was problems with it, I just opted to replace it entirely. To start this project off, I pull down the aromatic cedar, grab my jointing board and clamp it down to the table saw fence, and then after making sure my blade was at 90 degrees with my digital angle finder, I start running the boards through the jointer. With one side of the boards jointed, I pull the jointer board off the fence and rip the other side of the board off as well. Then resetting the fence once again, I resaw the boards to half their thickness with 2 passes through the saw, with the blade up about halfway. Then after the resawing, I get the thickness planer set up and mill everything to final thickness. Just making sure that the boards are completely flat on both sides, as I really don't want to take off too much more thickness. The boards are already fairly thin as is. Over at the router table, I set up a 3/4 inch straight bit and rip a rabbet down about halfway through the thickness of the board on one corner, as well as the opposite corner of the board to set up the shiplap joint. It's simple, but it'll work. With that done, I turn my attention to the frame of the base. Since I already jointed this board, I just ripped off the board into 3 equal segments and ran them through the thickness planer a few times. With the boards milled, I take them back to the table saw and rip the dado through the boards. Since I don't have a dado stack, I just run the boards through the saw multiple times, nudging the fence over slightly with each pass, checking my progress every so often with a scrap piece of the shiplap boards. And it was at this point that I took everything inside to acclimatize for a few weeks in the room that the hope chest will be living. No, I didn't forget about them. It was intentional. I'm serious. A couple weeks later, once the boards were sufficiently acclimatized, I brought everything back into the shop to carry on with the project. After I set up the crosscut sled on the table saw, I began to cut up the frame. Here I'm cutting the pieces to rough length, then taking everything off the rough end, and getting everything cut to final length. With the frame pieces cut to length, I start assembling some of the base. For now, I'm only assembling 3 of the 4 sides of the frame, since I still need a space to be able to put the shiplap into the frame. I put the 2 long sides and 1 short side together using my right angle clamps to hold everything, and attach everything together with wood glue and brad nails. It's not the strongest joint since it is end grain, but the brad nails will hold it together. Now that I have the final width of the frame established, I measure between the bottoms of the opposing dados to determine the required length for the shiplap. On the crosscut sled, I measure and fire a couple pin nails into a scrap piece to set up a stop block, and start cutting the shiplap into length, avoiding the rough ends, cracks, or other defects in the wood. I think it might be time for a new crosscut sled though. Once I have the shiplap cut to length, I cut the shiplap joint off of one to act as the start of the panel, and then test fit the rest of the panel, using some of my old business cards from the company that doesn't exist anymore as spacers to allow for wood movement. Not that they have any other use. The only information on there that's still valid is my name. That's it. I figured they would work the same as playing cards, and I got like 300 of them, so might as well. With the last shiplap piece thrown into place, I rip it to final width at the table saw, and the last piece of the frame fits perfectly. Since I still have to sand and finish everything, I pull all of the pieces back out, and number the backside to make sure that I put everything back in the same order. Speaking of sanding, I do it. I went through the grits up to about 220 grit. With the sanding completed, I take everything down to my basement finishing room and wipe down all of the pieces with the tack cloth that's clearly seen better days. So once I was done, I put it out of its misery. For easier application, I get my goblet of antique oil and give everything a coat of oil, wiping off the excess after about 5 minutes or so. Not to worry, I made sure to tightly ball up all of the oil-soaked rags and throw them in my waste paper and kindling bin. Don't do that. I have an old airtight paint can filled with water that all of my finishing cloths go into so I can properly dispose of them. Don't ball them up. You will burn your house down. Bad times will be had by all. I guess not the fire department if they like putting out fires, but not the point. Just don't do it. After the oil was dry or cured or whatever you want to call it, I came back and gave everything a few coats of shellac, denibbing the finish with 320 grit in between coats, and finishing it off with a 3000 grit sanding pad. I know this kind of defeats the purpose of using aromatic cedar, since you want it for the smell, but I wanted the rest of the base to look consistent with the rest of the hope chest. Yes, the interior of the hope chest was not finished, but I feel like that might have also contributed to the old base failing. So, finish the whole exterior, it is. With the shiplap panel finished, I turned my attention back to the frame. Since I just ran the dados all of the way through the frame pieces, I need to fill in the ends of the dados on the short ends of the frame. In order to avoid having to glue off glue squeeze out, I tape up the end and open up the hole. Then I cut up a square dowel I milled to size off camera and sand it down to final size to finally glue in and fill up the dado ends, which I just cut flush after the glue dried. With the dado ends plugged, sanded, oiled, and shellacked, the shiplap panel is popped back into place and the back of the frame is glued and nailed into place, and the new base was done. Time to attach it to the rest of the chest. First things first, I have to remove the old base, which I pop off with a pry bar, slowly working my way around the perimeter of the chest. After spending some time in making sure the new base is centered on the chest, I countersink 6 holes and nail down the chest to the base, using an old broken screwdriver as a punch. It was what I had, so why not? And the last step is to pull the old metal shoes off of the old base and tack them into each corner of the new base. And with that, this project is done. Looking at the old base, I can see a few wood movement problems which caused the base to crack, which someone, probably my wife's grandfather, repaired at some point. Now the main portion of the base is floating and it can expand and contract all at once, and it's not going to break anything. The feet were also structurally sound in one direction, which was not the direction I went to slide the chest. Now the feet are the entire base, so it should be good for a long time. I'm not going to say forever, but a long time. The color match is a little bit off for now, but that will level out over time, since the base is only a few weeks old, where the rest of the chest is, several decades. I'm really happy with how this project worked out. I think I might have overcorrected a little bit in my design revision, but there isn't anything necessarily wrong with that. If it makes the chest last another several decades, I'm happy. And with that, I'm going to call it a video. Thank you all for watching, and if you like what I'm doing here, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more. If you have any questions or comments, I look forward to reading them in the comment section below. And if you want to see more up-to-date projects, you can always follow me on Instagram at John the Schreiner. I am a lot more active over there, and I do usually do pretty much daily posts. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video, and have a good one.